it's been a while since we've had City Salt and started a series, but I'm looking forward to this one. And one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to this one is because normally right after New Year's, what does everybody come out with is kind of New Year's resolutions, or churches commonly think of like, oh, we have a theme for the year and stuff like that. And if you ask me, like, I always struggle with themes for the year because they always like wither out. Like by the summertime, we've kind of forgotten, what we've thought about and stuff like that. And so we're going to approach it a little bit different by taking a look at our values as a community. But before we get to the values as a community, I want to share, I have kind of a dream one day. I would love to climb Mount Everest. I would totally love to climb Mount Everest, hear different stories about it, see pictures online about what it would be like to climb Mount Everest. And it's one of the most famous mountains in the world because it is the tallest mountain in the world, about 29,000+ feet, and it is spectacular. And I was kind of reading about, well, how does one climb Mount Everest? Okay, because clearly it's not something like, oh, I'm going to do it this weekend, sort of thing, because you got to get out to Nepal and prepare. But when you go, and I was kind of looking at different excursions that you could take to climb Mount Everest. And in the excursions, you have, a variety of different websites that you can visit, but every website kind of has something similar. In that every website that is, selling an excursion to the top of Mount Everest has certain things that they hold of importance if you're going to do this. And so, some of the things that I was reading on the different websites is, clearly the first thing every website stresses is, yes, safety, right? Safety, safety, safety. But then they kind of go through of like, okay, well, how do we make sure we're safe? And every website always says good gear. And every good, probably trustworthy excursion is going to offer you gear, because they know that if you go and buy your own gear, that everybody knows if you go and buy your own gear, this gear gets expensive. And what are you likely to do when you buy your own gear? There's the $399 jacket, and then there's a $299 jacket. Which one are we going for? Right? So you can always go and choose to be a little bit frugal. The other thing that every website talks about is that you have to have a mental and physical health about you. All right? That you have to be training and get your cardiovascular system up, and you also have to be very aware of what's going on inside of you, because they say when you get up to certain elevations where the oxygen is low, different things start to happen. You start to have depression, you can have headaches. They even have stories of people having diarrhea on the mountain. I was like, I have no idea how you would have diarrhea on the Mount Everest, like with all the clothing that you have on. Who knows how that happens, but they warn you about it. All right, so clearly it happens quite frequently in low oxygen. So being aware of those things and how it plays on your mind, especially as you're going up and ascending, is really important. They teach you weather awareness, because the storms in Mount Everest just kind of come in without realizing it, and you can be blown off or lost on the trail and stuff like that. But all of the websites also say that you need to click into the ropes. Always make sure that you're secure. And kind of as you can see the red little line there as one of the possible pathways up to the mountain, up to the thank you. All right, all the way up to the peak, and they have ropes, lined out from kind of station to station. And what they say is like you kind of click into everybody else who's climbing with you, because if you're going to go, you might as well take everybody else with you. And then also click into the rope that guides you up to the mountain. Always make sure you're clicked into multiple things, because anything can happen at any time. So you got to click into multiple ropes and always make sure. And so they talk about all these different things that they really value, especially if you are setting your sights on getting to the peak of the mountain. If you want to get to the summit of the mountain, you have to value these things. You have to value your safety, you have to value good gear and all these different things. All right? And the reason why they say that is because compromise is very subtle, right? So we're saying, like, if you have to hike up to the mountain, to the peak, and you need a jacket that they're telling you costs $400, and there's a jacket that you can buy for $250, and it looks just as thick and squishy and warm when you try it on in the store, you might be tempted, right? You might be tempted. If you're looking at different ropes, and you're like, okay, climbing ropes are expensive. Climbing ropes are really expensive. You may look and be like, let me save another like $50 or something like that. All these different things add up. Now, compromise is subtle, but compromise is costly. Compromise is subtle, but compromise is costly. Now, the trick to compromise is that early on, as you're hiking up the mountain, you may not notice a difference. You're looking around, I'm hiking just as fine as everybody else. They seem warm, I'm warm. We're all clipped into the same ropes. Like, what's the big deal? I just saved $250 in buying my gear. Compromise is rarely ever noticed at the beginning. Compromise is costly because as you get to the top, you notice the difference. Okay? Because the situation and the environment changes drastically over several thousand feet up. And so you can get away with compromise close to base camp. But you don't want to realize you've compromised on the wrong things as you get to the top. Because it could be too late. So compromise is a tricky thing. And people have paid the price with their lives because they compromise. Because they want to click in just this one time, my hand was just a little bit too cold. All right? Or I don't want to, bring this gear with me. I want to bring other gear that they told me not to do. It costs. Or I used too much oxygen early on because I wasn't in good physical health, and I get to the top, and that is not a place that you want to run out of oxygen, right? So compromise is subtle, but compromise is really costly. You rarely notice it at the beginning, but you will definitely notice it as you get closer to the top, and it may be the difference of whether you get to the top or not. But we see compromises happen not just in climbing, because looking here, I don't think anybody's climbed Mount Everest. Good. We're on the same page. But all of us have compromised in some way or another. Okay? All of us have compromised at work. All right? Maybe taking a little corner. We've compromised in relationships. We've compromised in so many different ways. And we compromised because it was the path of least resistance or for whatever factors played into it. And we didn't notice it. But probably at some point, as the situation intensified, you look back and you can be like, shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have taken that shortcut. That cost me. And so that idea of compromising is pervasive in our society. We compromise so much in society. And actually, compromise is something at times to be praised. Oh, you're a good compromiser. You're a good negotiator. We compromise. We found a compromise, right? But somebody, actually Jim Collins, he is an author, who went and he looked at major companies that were really, really successful, and he started to look and say, what makes these companies so successful? Why were these companies able to reach the summit in their respective industries? Why were they able to reach the summit? And so he researched all these companies like IBM and Boeing and Sony and Walt Disney and 3M. I never knew the 3M little stickers that you use around your house was so successful, but it's apparently a big company, all right? But he looked at all these different companies and he said, why were they so successful? Why did they reach the summit in their respective fields? And in interviewing all the major players in all these different companies, he interviewed Tom Watson Jr., who was a former CEO of IBM. And Tom Watson said this regarding the success of IBM. He said, I believe that any organization, in order to survive and achieve success, must have a sound set of beliefs. on which it premises all its policies and actions. Next, I believe that the most important single factor in corporate success is faithful adherence to those beliefs. Beliefs must always come before policies, practices, and goals. The latter must always be altered if they are seen to violate the fundamental beliefs. What essentially Tom Watson Jr. is saying is that every company, if they are going to be successful and reach the pinnacle, has to have a set of core values. And that they adhere to these core values uncompromisingly. And everything that comes after, like their policies and their procedures, all these different things, are always based on the core values. And if we get into a situation where the two are conflicting, we adhere to the core values and we change the policies. We change the policies. That is how these companies become so successful in their own right. They have core values, and they don't compromise their core values. Now, as we kind of take that and we think of ourselves, okay, and what I want to ask is, okay, we see that core values are essential to achieving success. But what is the danger of not having core values? What is the danger of not having core values? And we can pick out the danger of not having core values by kind of examining ourselves. All right? Think to yourself in a situation where you reacted to the situation impulsively. Where something happened, you didn't know exactly what to do, you just kind of went with your gut, and later on you're like, that was not the right decision. I should not have done that. All right? Let me give you some examples. Parents who don't explicitly value quality time with the family or their kids are likely, when opportunities at work come up to take on more shifts or more responsibilities, they'll pick it up. Students who question the value of church and attendance and service are more likely, when the workload gets out of hand, to say, it's okay, I'm busy. Right? I got all this work to do. Parents who are out in public, okay, and are struggling to manage their kids. Their kids are driving them crazy. What do? Yeah, just take the phone. Keep yourself busy. Keep yourself quiet. Right? We can act impulsively just to solve the situation, to find the path of least resistance. Usually in those situations, what it does is it indicates to us that maybe we don't have a clear set or a clear understanding of what we value as an individual. And as a result, the pressure of the situation is causing me to just react in a desire to just find the path of least resistance. All right? And so the way we want to think about it is, if I don't have clear values, I'm likely to act reactively. Versus if I have core values, I can be proactive in the situation. Because when we have core values, what it does is it allows us to subordinate our emotions to our values. Okay? It allows us to take the emotions that we're feeling in the moment and put them underneath the value that we are telling ourselves, this is really important. So even though it's difficult, I'm going to wrestle through this. Right? If we don't have a value, then our emotions will get the best of us, we'll find the path of least resistance, and we'll pay the price later. But if we have a value, we'll be like, this is a difficult situation, but this is really important to me, so now I'm going to wrestle through it. All right? So there's a difference between reactive and proactive. Reactive, no values, or unclear values. Proactive, I got values that are helping me bring my emotions into line. Let me give you some examples of people who have had values and it helped them subordinate or bring their emotions or the tensions of the situations in life into check. All right? Who's this? Anybody know? Chick-fil-A, all right? This is the man behind Chick-fil-A, all right? Truett Cathy. Started Chick-fil-A many, many years ago. And what is Chick-fil-A known for? They close on Sunday. They close on Sunday, all right? Now, there was a period of time in Chick-fil-A's history where the economy was down. They were really struggling. Their profits for the year were reaching an all-time low. And so the pressure was on, what do we do about Sunday? We're already struggling. We're struggling to make it with 6 days a week. Other companies and fast food chains are struggling too, but they're making it and they're open 7 days a week. So there's a lot of pressure from the board of Chick-fil-A to say, let's open up on Sundays. And it was a very tense moment in that boardroom. But Truett held to his belief because he was a godly man. Say no. On Sunday, we will remain closed, and God will guide us. And they made it through that year. And Chick-fil-A did not go bankrupt. And Chick-fil-A remained open. And Chick-fil-A continued to flourish. Situation like that, a lot of tension, a lot of emotion, a lot of facts going on. Look at the numbers. The numbers don't add up. Okay, and those numbers can cause us to act in certain ways. But he had a value. He said, no, we remain closed on Sunday. He probably learned that lesson because he's a bit godly man looking at the Bible. Because the children of God were in a similar situation. Children of God were told in the 10 Commandments, the longest and most detailed commandment of the 10 was to keep the Sabbath. Keep it holy. Don't trade. Don't exchange on those days. Don't do any work. Nothing that brings in income to the country. You keep the Sabbath. You keep it holy. What happened? Economic times got hard. Bad decisions were made. The kingdoms were starting to crumble. And what did they begin to fold on? The Sabbath. They started to fold on the Sabbath. And it was one of the many different things that they folded on that led to their ultimate exile for 70 years. And in the exile, as God was preparing them for the exile, he said, all those years you didn't keep the Sabbath, I will reap the Sabbath in these 7 years. I will find rest for the land, because you didn't give the land rest. You didn't give yourselves rest. Even though you were working for 400 plus years in Egypt, and I brought you out, and I told you that on this day you will rest. You didn't believe me. You didn't follow. Back we go to the drawing board. And when they eventually came out of exile, what did they reinstitute? The Sabbath. God reinstituted the Sabbath. Okay? God valued his people resting. In 6 days, I can provide everything that you need. But I value that you rest on this day. All right? So God had values. He has values with respect to how he wants his people to function. I'll give you one more example about people who act reactive versus proactive. Let's go back to the Old Testament as well. King Saul was the first king of Israel. Good king or bad king? It started okay, went bad pretty quick. All right? One of the things that Saul went bad in was, one, he offered a sacrifice when he shouldn't have because it was the role of the priest. But at another time, God was giving him a second chance. He said, look, I want you to go fight this battle and kill everything there. The king and take nothing of the spoils. And he went. He didn't kill the king. Okay, he kept the king as his own prisoner. He kept the good portions and all these different things. And eventually Samuel the prophet at the time was going to check and see how the battle was. And as Samuel kind of came over the mountain, what did he hear? The bleating of sheep in his ear. And he went up and he saw that King Agag was the king he was supposed to kill, but he didn't kill. And Samuel looked. He's like, Saul, what's going on? And Saul's like, I've done everything the Lord commanded me. And he's like, why do I hear sheep? He's like, we're going to sacrifice it. We just kept the good things to sacrifice to God. Like, what about King Agag? Like, you were told to kill him. It's like, we're just kind of keeping him. Right? So all these different things. King Saul was making all the excuses. Then Samuel says this. Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifice as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. What do we get a sense here? That God is valuing something. He's valuing obedience. He's valuing obedience. So let's kind of ask ourselves, okay, as we're talking about values and kind of honing in, what is a value? A value is a certain belief or a set of beliefs held to be of high importance. The question for us is, how important is high importance? And that's why the name of this series is Uncompromising Values, because we want to get to the point where we don't compromise on our values, because if we do, we will pay the price for it. Maybe not now, but we will pay a long-term price for it. And we pay that price as individuals in the decisions that we make if we have unclear values for our lives, and we will pay the price as a community if we deviate from our values. But why should we adhere to values so hard? Why should we have a set of values and push ourselves to adhere to those values? What is the fruit of having a value? The problem with values, or adhering to a value, especially in our infancy, is that values early on rarely bring fruit. And in fact, values cause us more headache at the beginning than they do bring fruit. Because when you set a value, you're saying, I'm going to act in a certain way, whether somebody likes it or not. Right? So if all of a sudden I set a value at work because I've been overworked, and I'm saying, no, I value like my life, my spiritual life, my family, all these different things, and I go to work and be like, I can't pick up these shifts, or I can't take on this project. What does a value bring you? Not great things at work. More resistance at work. Frustration from your boss and colleagues. All right? So a value in the short term rarely brings fruit, but it always brings fruit in the long term. Okay? Because it always allows us to reach that summit. So rarely short, but always long is the fruit that we see in value. Give you a couple of examples. All right? You value your education. You may not like it, but you value it. Okay? When does it actually pay off? Not in first grade. Not in fifth grade. Not in senior in high school. Sometimes not even after you graduate college. Right? Sometimes we become so super educated that it takes many years to pay off. But if you value education, then what happens? On the day you don't want to go to class, what do? Don't tell me what you do. For this example, we go to class. All right? We value education. We subordinate our emotions of, I don't want to get up, I don't want to go to class, I don't understand the teacher, all these different things. We bring that under, and we say, gotta go to class. All right? If we value our health, and we exercise and we eat right, do we get the benefit now? No. But when we're 55, we reduce the risk of having a stroke or a heart attack. Not saying those things can't happen, but we reduce that risk. Okay? Do you like it when it's cold outside and you're like, I gotta go run because I value my health? No. In the short term, it causes more problems. Okay? Do you like this value of health during the holiday season? No. Do we like this value of health during the Holy 50? Absolutely not. But we need it. Because if we don't value our health, okay, short term is tough, long term, it pays off. All right? Let's talk about our spiritual lives. Do we always enjoy prayer and reading the Bible and coming to church? No, we don't always enjoy it. But if we value it, it pays off later on. Okay? That means when Sunday morning rolls around and it's raining and it's cold outside and I gotta park on the street and walk inside, I tell myself, no, I value this relationship and building this relationship with God. I value my rule of life. And so I'm going to take my emotions and bring them under my values. knowing that in the long term, it's going to pay off. All of us have tendency to get off track in life. We can get off track individually, we can get off track maritally, we can get off track with our careers, and we can get off track as a church. And so values become really important because values are what bring us back. They become the anchor to what we do. Because without them, the crosswinds of society and the pressures are too great, and we won't stand. I kind of touched on it before, but I do want to take a look at God and values. Because when we talk about values and say, why are they important to us? They're important to us because they're important to God. Okay, values were important to him. And God, with his values, was uncompromising. God did not compromise on his values. So, easy things that he had valued. He valued humanity. He valued justice. He valued mercy, long-suffering, truth, forgiveness, integrity. All these things he valued. He highly valued our salvation. So what did he do? Did he compromise and say, okay, Archangel Gabriel, go figure out salvation? No. What do we read in the Gregorian liturgy? Neither an angel nor an archangel, neither a patriarch or a prophet have you entrusted with our salvation. He wasn't going to compromise. He wasn't going to leave it up for it to work or not work. He knew that for our salvation to be uncompromised, it had to come from him. And so, he valued also relating to us. So he became human, which is what we celebrate during this season of Nativity and Epiphany and all these different things that the church is focusing on. All right, so he values these things, and he was uncompromising with it. He also valued understanding. And we see that in the way that he taught, because how did he teach most commonly? Through parables, which is a way that people could understand. Okay, so he valued us understanding. He brought common situations and delivered eternal truths through them. And so, values are important to God, but values always need to be put into context. All right? Values always need to be put into context. Right? So we can value hard work. We hear values hard work. Nobody. Great. All right? Value hard work. But if I say I need to bring it into context. If you're a student, hard work means something. If you're a thief, hard work means something else. So values need to be put into context. Loyalty is a great value. Loyalty to your spouse is something. Loyalty to your fraternity or sorority is something else. Right? So loyalty is a great value to have. But it has to have appropriate context. And so the question for us becomes, what's our context here in this community? And for a free book on the book table that's already free, right? What is our mission statement? Provides a context for our values. What is our mission statement? On the bottom of the email every week. I think very few people get that far in the email. I'll take a few words. Good news is in there. Yeah. Okay. Oh, somebody's reading off the phone, man. All right. All right, so let's talk about our mission statement because it provides the context of the values of our community. We are a community of Orthodox Christians living the good news of Jesus Christ, which transforms people who transform the world. Okay? Let's break it up. We live it out through 4 ships, okay? Membership, fellowship, discipleship, and apostleship. But I'm going to offer another way of looking at it, okay? When we talk about the community of Orthodox Christians, what essentially this does is this says that our worldview, the way we see everything, comes through the Orthodox lens. We see everything through the Orthodox lens. So it provides context for what we do, okay? Living the good news of Jesus Christ, this is our orthopraxy. This is how we practice through the church. the sacraments that we participate in, how we preach, how we celebrate, all the different things, the life of the church, the seasons of the church. This is how we live out the good news of Jesus Christ. And the last part, which transforms people, who transform the world, is the liturgical life. Because the work of the people isn't here, like part of it is here, but the work of the people is out there. Okay, we come here, we're fed, and we go out there to do the work of the people. The work of the people of this church, of this belief, go out there to do the work of the people, which brings people back to Christ. And when they are transformed, they go back out and they do the same thing. The process repeats. All right? So let's kind of think of that and say, for that, all right, that's the context for our core values. What are our core values? We talked about them from time to time. And if you've taken the membership course, you've had them. Okay, relevance, integrity, discipleship, generosity, evangelism. Good. What's that spell? Bridge. Relevance, integrity, discipleship, generosity, and evangelism. Those are our core values here in this community. And what we want to do is talk about, over this series, which will be 3 weeks, all right, we're going to talk about our core values and really get a better sense of what our, why we have these values, how we see them being implemented in the church, all right? Now, Jesus was the author of relevance for the reasons I stated before. One, he wanted to be relevant to humanity and connect, so he became human. And the way he taught in ways that were relevant to people. We read the parables now, we're like, okay, I don't have a feed that I'm sowing seeds on, but it made sense to people back then. All right, so he taught in a very relevant way. But before I get into that, I do want to tell you a story of relevance. And I'm going to go back when I was in residency, and I was in the ICU as a resident, and in the ICU is quite possibly the worst 6 weeks of your life, all right? Because when you're given every morning, you'd have to come in and to check on certain patients. And you either had like 3 or 4 patients. It was a bad day if you had 4, if it was a good day if you had 3. Each patient was so complex that, at least as a resident, it took at least 20, 30 minutes to figure out, like, get all the labs, look at the patient, examine the patient, look at the monitors, see what's going on, what changes happened overnight, come up, like, synthesize it all, come up with a plan, and then go on to the next patient. It took like 30 minutes. So we started at 7, we were in the hospital by 5, and there was like 8 residents and interns. We all had our patients and stuff like that. 30 minutes before rounds, the attending would come in, and we probably had like 16, 18 patients. He would go 2 to 3 minutes in each room, look at the monitor, look at this. Next room, jot some notes. Same thing over and over. Zip through like 18 patients. Okay? We're always on rounds, we go door by door, and we present on the patient that we just like learned, and stuff like that. And my attending, Dr. Lee, had a certain thing that he would do, where he would listen to us like this. And like, okay, I just spent 30 minutes like trying to put all the information together. Don't you want to write something down? Like, take notes? I did a lot of work for you. Just like doing this. And maybe like I say one thing, and I'll write it down. And then finally, at some point, he looked, he's like, look guys, we already know all the information. We've synthesized it already. I'm just waiting for you to say something that's relevant to the case that might influence like our decision and plan of care. He was kind of listening and trying to sift through all the different like facts that we would blurt out and report that we thought were so important. He was just looking for something small. We knew we were irrelevant when this was going on. We knew we hit gold when this happened. All right? But he taught us what was relevant in the care of a patient. He taught us what was relevant in the care of a patient. And as a church, we kind of have to do the same thing. This is why as a church, relevance is really important. As I was saying before, Jesus was the author of relevance. He taught us in terms that we could understand. He taught us through his humanity. He taught us through parables. He taught us through his actions. He taught us through his miracles. He taught us in ways that were very, very relevant to us and to the condition of humanity. And that's really important because our faith comes through the hearing. All right, St. Paul said it, so that faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. And so when our Lord came, he wanted to make sure that we heard clearly the word of God coming from him. In his flesh, in his words, in his actions, everything that he did was extremely relevant to us, which is why Jesus was the most influential person to ever walk this earth, because he was the only one to save the earth. So he was extremely relevant, and we learned that from him. So what about SBSS and relevance? How do we challenge ourselves here in the community to be relevant to what's going on? And the first place that we really set our sights on trying to be relevant is with respect to the liturgy. Because the liturgy is the heartbeat of the church. A lot of our theology, a lot of our dogma, a lot of our understanding comes from the liturgical rites of the church. And it's a journey, like I was kind of sharing in the sermon earlier today, it's a journey that culminates in the union with God. And so it's a very, very important journey. And so it's one that we have chosen, as other churches are, to make sure that that journey doesn't have starts and stops and I drift off, and not to say like people don't drift off in liturgy here, but what we want to make sure is that we can understand what we are doing and what we are saying. Because it is an important part of our being able to unite and commune with God. So we are trying to make the liturgy and the rites of the church and the seasons of the church very relevant to us by making sure that we understand them over time. And liturgy is a really, really, it's such a useful way to bring up different theological concepts and understand it. I'll give you an example. And I know this example has actually happened to other priests as well, but like I was sitting with my son, he kind of, he was listening to the service and we were driving home, and he just kind of stops while we're driving home. He's like, "Dad, what's a virgin?" You heard it at church, all right? It was an opportunity to teach theology, but because he was able to understand, because he was able to say, like, what was a virgin? How is St. Mary a virgin? And he's starting to put it together. But that ability to be able to understand was really important, and it made like what was happening at church relevant to what was happening at the home, because it provided an opportunity for us to talk about church and home and morals and all these different things. So when we have a liturgy and rites that are accessible to us and relevant to us, it's an important thing. It's an important part of our journey as individuals. So relevance is important with respect to liturgical rites. The other thing that as a church community we have to always be aware of is being relevant to our demographics as a community. Okay, put a nice little map up there. And it's kind of cool because we actually don't have our own building, but we've replaced the Grand on Google. All right? Don't tell the management. All right? No, if you search the Grand, it pops up. But when you search our church, it shows up as if we have our own building and stuff like that. But it's important for us to look as a community and say, okay, we are in the city of Baltimore. That should influence how we serve. That should influence the ministries that we do. That's why we participate with loaves and fishes. That's why, as a team of servants, we're kind of looking and asking ourselves, long term, being in the city, how do we find our niche in the city? How do we be an active participant with Baltimore in making Baltimore better? Because we are in this city. We need to be relevant to this city. All right? Because of also being in the city and being near so many different universities, we have a unique demographics of students who are still on break that we are trying to figure out how to serve. And we've invested our resources as a church community in doing that very intentionally. So it's because of where we are as a community that we're also trying to be relevant as a community to our demographics and relevant to society. To Baltimore. The other thing that we need to be relevant to is with respect to society. Okay, that we need to be aware of certain trends that are happening in society and how that is affecting the masses of people. So one of the things that I do and that Peter and I do together is that we challenge ourselves to continue to read different literature on what is happening with different generations. That is what is happening with ministries, trends in ministry, things that are working in ministry, things that aren't working in ministry. We talk about it with our respective teams. We try and challenge ourselves to say, okay, what's going on? What is the problem? Like, how are we seeing the problem manifest, and what is the root problem behind it? Because society is changing. One of the ways that society has changed and really influenced the way all churches function has to do with technology. Technology has dramatically changed how we serve. And so we need to become, we need to figure out how to serve in a relevant way to a very tech-savvy generation, which is going to change some of the things we do, or alter them. The problem, kind of the slippery slope of this, is that our goal isn't to chase society. We cannot chase society. Society changes too fast, all right? But what we have to do is read society. Because society will manifest problems, okay? We'll see the manifestation of problems in society through certain trends. And the challenge of the church is to distill it out and say, well, what's the root problem, right? So I'll give you an example. There's an abundance of anxiety and depression going on in society. One of the root problems has to do with self-worth and value. That there is a huge lack of self-worth and value that is leading a lot of people to be anxious and struggle from depression. Right? So society is manifesting something, but we have to look for the root problem, and the challenge of the church is to be relevant to the root problem. Because the root problems have been there. All throughout history, they just manifest in different ways according to what's happening in society. So we need to challenge ourselves to be relevant to those problems and address them. And hopefully City Salt is one of the avenues that we hope to address. The issues that are going on and the way that we talk should be relevant to what we're struggling with. And we're not always relevant. Sometimes we miss the mark. But because we have a value of relevance, we can come back to the conversation and be like, we were a bit off on that series. And that has happened before. We need to come back and address it in this way. All right? Or we haven't addressed this problem, this has become a bigger problem, we have to address it. So it kind of provides the opportunity and avenue for us to be relevant to what is going on. Because if we are not relevant, there's no way the church can be transformational. Okay? Without being relevant, the church cannot be transformational. Because if there is a disconnect, okay, do you tune in or do you tune out? You tune out. Are you transformed by things that you tune out to or things that you tune into? We're changed by the things we tune into. So the more we as a church community challenge ourselves to be relevant on multiple different levels, and even levels that I haven't even discussed here, or levels that we'll find in the future, the church will become a place of transformation. When we are relevant to what is going on around us, and when we're relevant to what is going on inside of us. Relevance leads to transformation. If we're irrelevant, then we are not going to fulfill our goal of being a community where transformation happens. So that's relevance. In the next 2 weeks, we'll talk about the next 4 values. Any questions so far on relevance? Or core values as a community? All right, well, let's stand up and let's pray.